all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You gotta work. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're gonna feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome to yet another edition of Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV, and I want to thank you. The numbers just keep going up. That's great for us. Also, hopefully that means that we're doing something right. Do like us, do follow us, do retweet us, and you can subscribe to Unprecedented TV on YouTube as well. Slowly, we're going up what's called the search engines as we solidly make progress with our great presenters. We've got Claire Dyer, who will be on again tomorrow, of course, with Dire Consequences. Tim Scott will be doing Tim Scott Uncancelled sometime in the next couple of weeks. And I'm glad to say after extended talks, we've got Nick Dark with The Dark Side. She'll be starting anytime soon as well. But back to today, I want to talk about law and order and the collapse of law and order in the United Kingdom. Why do I say that? Well, that's because we keep seeing incidences which begin to look very much like something that I've been predicting for a while. Vigilantism, the frustration in the British public seems to be spilling over increasingly in the streets as the general public feel that they're just not getting what they need in terms of, well, law and order. It's not complicated. It doesn't necessarily make it right. But I've seen it before. I grew up in Northern Ireland, where in what was called the Troubles, paramilitaries often policed their own communities. And surprisingly enough, actually, there wasn't very much trouble there because, let's put it this way, you didn't get a lawyer. You just got a lot of trouble if you broke the rules established in those communities. Maybe that's what's happening across Britain. But why is it happening? And what are the implications for the country? Let me share my views before I bring Nick Buckley, MBE, in. He's got some very erudite points to make on this. Essentially, what I think is happening is frustration's increasing, and the public watches impotently on as law and order just seems to be disintegrating. Nigel Farage, the leader of the Reform UK party, made fairly big statements recently about this. And he said he was going to halve crime in this country. Pretty tall order, fairly high price tag, a lot cheaper, by the way, than net zero or net stupid zero, as Richard Tice calls it, also from Reform UK. But he said he would halve crime with some quite remarkable claims. Well, maybe he can, maybe he can't, but there's no doubt this is a major issue for many of us. People are saying they don't want to trust their children playing in the streets. They're worried about sexual assaults. They're worried about knife crime, machete fights in broad daylight in our high streets. All of this seems to be different to the way that Britain was when I was growing up. Has it changed for you? And why is it happening? There's a combination of reasons, I think. One is the police simply can't cope with the influx. I've had my phone stolen twice in a 6-month period in central London. It's one reason I try not to take my business into London anymore. I think it's lawless. In both occasions, the police pretty much told me there was no chance of me getting my phone back. On one occasion, I was able to track my phone to some place in North London. I watched it until it disappeared. And I said, this is where it is. Well, they shrugged and said, we're not going to go and get it. I suppose I could have gone there myself, but since I assume it was part of organized crime, that would have been quite dangerous. I could have become a physical victim of crime in terms of assault as well as a victim of theft. So I've really lost a lot of faith there myself. The police could have done something about getting my phone back, but they did not. And I bet you there were hundreds of phones at that final destination, or at least in this country, of that phone. They even told me what was going to happen. They said the phone would be exported and its parts used. They know the system. On another occasion, I had a briefcase stolen, maybe about 8 years ago in central London. Once again, no prospect of getting it back or anything from it as well. So I've seen this at first hand. Luckily, I wasn't stabbed on either occasion, though it's the scum who stole my phone the first time were quite clearly armed and had overwhelming numbers, so there was not much I could do. Ironically, that was just outside Charing Cross Police Station in central London. So my conclusion is that there's an emboldenment amongst the scum who perpetrate crime because they don't think they're going to be arrested. The second thing I think is happening is that our culture is being changed by the absence of any meaningful migration policy. People who aren't associated with this country come here and they don't feel they have to assimilate. They don't have to become part of the culture. When my parents came here as migrants in World War II or just after it, they were very clear that they had to become part of our society, and they brought me up in the same way. I'm bilingual and I have a strong Estonian culture, as it happens. That's where my name comes from. But I was always told that I needed to respect and value the culture of the country that had taken my parents and their parents in. I don't feel that's really happening so much anymore. That's my view. I wonder what you think, and whether you feel we can actually do this better. Have your say as well. Go to my X or indeed to the YouTube account. But the person who I really want to talk to now is Nick Buckley, MBE, who has strong views on this too. Well, you've heard my rant, Nick. Big question for you. Is law and order collapsing in our country?
Simple answer is yes. We see it all around us, don't we? We see it all around us every single day. And we've got to this point over many decades. This isn't as simple as it's just migration. Migration is a huge issue, and they are bringing crime to our shores. But it goes beyond that. This all started after the Second World War, when we became a pink and fluffy nation. So after the Second World War, we stopped punishing criminals. We got the new far left-wing way of dealing with criminals. We've got to hug them. Prisons aren't about punishment. It's about rehabilitation. The reason why we have criminals is because it's our fault, because our society is too unfair. We got all that nonsense coming through. Then we started damaging the police force. So from the 60s, 70s, we started saying, do you know what's a good idea? Let's get weaker and weaker people to join the police force. And it started off with women. Nothing wrong with women. Women can do most of the policing, the role of policing, as good as men, most of it, but not all of it. If you're a 5'1" woman, you are not as strong as a 5'8" man. And that's a dramatic difference there. So we started lowering the recruitment bar, strength, fitness, to get more women to join. And then in the 80s, we did exactly the same thing again to get more ethnic minorities to join. We started lowering standards again. At this moment in time, you can join the police with a criminal record. If your family are all involved in organised crime, you can still join the police. If you've got a criminal record, you can join the police. If you can't speak English, you can join the police.
So hang on. So if your family is actively involved in organised crime, you can still join the police?
Yes, because it's unfair on the police picking on you when you've done nothing wrong because all your family have organised crime. So these are the ways we started lowering the recruitment bar. And now we have a police force now who are basically social workers, hence why they want to dance at Pride. Hence why we've seen the videos where people reporting crime and they're going to the woman reporting sexual assault. You can't use those words to us. You can't say he's a foreign scumbag, but he's tried to rape me. That doesn't matter. You can't use the word foreign scumbag when you're reporting your crime to me. That's how we've got to this issue. And then let's look at mass migration. We've imported millions from the third world, and we think they're going to hit our shores and be Englishmen and English women and respect law. And I mean, not everyone in this country who is white and British respects law and order. I get that. But we're importing people with such traditions and such norms that have now turned our cities into no-go areas, basically. Hence why you've been robbed a couple of times in London. I was involved in a criminal act 2 months ago, I didn't even bother phoning the police. What's the point? I know for a fact they're going to do nothing. So even I don't report crime anymore to the police. And I worked with the police for 2 decades. I used to be based in police stations. I've trained police officers. On my cupboard there, I've got awards off Greater Manchester Police. And even I have lost all faith in the police.
It's interesting what you say, Nick. I didn't mention this, but in both occasions when my phone was stolen, it was quite clearly by foreign people who couldn't really speak English because they blurted something at me. And it was quite obvious that they were not of British descent. So although that was an assumption, you're completely right in that case. Now let's look at an example here. And this is from an assault that occurred in Manchester Airport. Initially, it was implied that the police were guilty or might be guilty of a racist assault against some people who were of ethnically foreign extraction. And all of the headlines were, is this a racist assault? Are the police in Manchester guilty? And then we had something like this. If we can actually play the video, this is when the story began to develop, and it was obvious that the police were actually acting in a defensive way.
Footage has emerged tonight showing chaotic scenes at Manchester Airport just moments before a man was kicked in the head by a police officer. Video of that incident led to protests in Manchester and the wider area. The police officer involved is under investigation. Well, the new video obtained by the Manchester Evening News shows violent scenes between a number of individuals and the police, which led up to that incident. Well, I'm joined now by our correspondent Alice Porter. So talk us through what you've seen and what we now know about the wider incident.
Well, this all relates to Tuesday evening when there was clearly an altercation between police officers and a number of individuals at Manchester Airport. And there was a video that has been widely circulated over the last few days, which really shocked a lot of people. You can see the image there of an officer appearing to stamp on a man's head and that really, and punching him, and it really caused a huge amount of outrage. And of course, as you were saying there, an officer was indeed suspended. Greater Manchester Police have referred themselves to the police watchdog. But what we've obtained just in the last 10 minutes or so is footage which perhaps provides a little bit of context, or certainly a bit more information about what was leading up to that particular moment. So from the footage that you're seeing now, you can see two female officers and one male officer who approach an individual, and you can see it becomes very chaotic, very aggressive. And there you can see a female police officer right there is punched in the face, and there is another female officer on the ground. That individual then takes the police officer in a headlock, and you can just see it is a chaotic scene with then that individual man on the ground lying face down. So we don't know the ins and outs of what happened there, but we are getting some more information from Greater Manchester Police. They say that 3 officers were assaulted on Tuesday evening, and including one female officer who received a broken nose. Now, we've heard from Andy Burnham, who's the mayor for Greater Manchester. Now, he's watched the full video. He says this is a complicated situation with 2 sides to it. It is why I urge people not to rush to judgment.
Now, that's the interesting thing. You stood against Andy Burnham to be mayor of Manchester. And as soon as I saw Andy Burnham saying this, I was sure that the police weren't just randomly assaulting people in Manchester Airport. I didn't really think that was going to happen anyway. But when you look at the whole picture there, Nick, it rather underlines an aspect of what you've been saying, that the police are hobbled in their activities because the mainstream media was all too eager to imply that the police were guilty. But even as we speak, this whole situation continues to develop in a revelationary way, suggesting that the individuals responsible were potentially guilty of assaulting the police, not the other way around.
Yeah, the police have a hard job, and I get that, and I've seen that firsthand. But the first thing we need to look at are the 3 officers. 3 officers can't arrest 2 men at Manchester Airport. Why? because two of them are female. And the both two females grab one man and he pushes them off as if they're children. So incompetence there. We're not recruiting the best people for the job. And those officers were armed. So that officer is looking at that man on the floor who's just knocked out his two colleagues. I believe he's an armed police. They're armed police officers, I believe. So they've got handguns on them, I believe. And he's thinking, if this guy gets up off the floor now, I'm in deep trouble. It's 2 against 1. My two colleagues are crap. So it's me against 2 men. Hence why he stamps and kicks him in the head, because if he gets up, I might have to shoot him. And if I shoot him, I'm in a whole world of pain here with the HR department if I shoot him. So therefore, I'm going to stamp on his head. So the police have got a very, very difficult job. I get that. But just because it's a difficult job doesn't mean we have to accept incompetence. But that's what we tend to do now. You're either on the side of the police or you're anti-police. I like to think I'm somewhere in between. But as time goes on, I'm becoming more and more anti-police as I see the level of incompetence and the level of ideology within the police. Andy Burnham coming out with that statement, we have to, they've got 2 sides to this story. We have to wait. What he's basically saying is, I don't want to get involved because I heavily rely on the Muslim Pakistani vote in Greater Manchester. So I'm not coming down on anyone's side here because I want to get elected again, even though I'm the police crime commissioner of Greater Manchester.
So you're less sympathetic to Andy Burnham, who I still think is miles ahead of Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, and frankly, the most useless cabinet this country has ever endured, in my opinion. But yes, he did seem to be very cautious at the time. But he did, in fairness to Andy Burnham, he did call out the mainstream media at that time, saying, hold on a second, it's a complicated situation. He's seen the whole video. And I was sure, absolutely sure at that point, that I would end up siding with the police on this incident. You've made an interesting point that the male officer had to take proportionate action in case this idiot got up and carried on fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget how we got that video in the first place. Somebody working at Manchester Airport CCTV leaked that video because the police and government and probably Andy Burnham didn't want that video going out to the public. All they wanted to show was the kicking of the head. Someone leaked that. The police launched an investigation to try to find the person who leaked the footage. That's how bad things
Really?
are. Yes.
So they actually tried to suppress that video, or they wanted to.
Well, they didn't release it, and whoever released it, the police launched an investigation to find the person who launched it. Luckily, they never found the person, as my understanding, but nobody wanted us to see that video.
That's remarkable, considering that video was a game changer.
But don't forget,
Totally changed the story.
Policing in the UK now is all about community cohesion. It's not about catching criminals. That's why we've had 40 years of the grooming rape gang scandal. It's all about community tension, community feelings. We had hundreds of people turn up at Rochdale Police Station on the day that happened, and the police stayed in their station, locked the doors, and didn't even try to police the demonstrations, because it's all about community tension, community relationships. That's how we police now. And the reason why we police like that in this country, and that's why we have 2-tier policing, the reason why we have that is because you cannot police this country now the same. Every city, every neighborhood the same. You can't, because we've become balkanized. We've become individual tribes. You're the Afghani tribe, you're the Pakistanis, you're the white British. We'll police them all differently because the elite, the establishment know we've got huge problems. We've got violence coming down the road here. And the only way we can maybe subdue the violence or push the violence to another day is by policing a balkanized state. So we'll have different rules and different laws in different neighborhoods.
Let's look at another example of this. And this was the story that led to the largest number of responses to a tweet I've ever had, well over 1 million. And it was when that, and I'm going to use the phrase, that scum murdered children in Southport. And we were immediately told that he was born in Wales, quite clearly. The inference was he was Welsh. Axel Rudabakana or I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, and I don't care. Doesn't sound like a very Welsh name to me. And also, it's nothing to do with terrorism. And then we had an immediate reaction from the public, who were absolutely incensed. You might remember these incidents, if I can find it. Yeah, let's see.
Property and the police, and are responsible for some of the most serious and sustained public violence the UK has seen in a decade. But who are the anti-immigration protesters taking part in riots across the country?
It might be, for example, what we saw in Southport. People travelled into Southport, people from these extremist groups, whoever it was. These people were, almost sort of their duty to go up and stand for their nation, in inverted commas, and kind of take to the streets of Southport and riot. So I think what we are seeing is people from the outside coming in, but then also locals, kind of protesting and rioting in quite violent and reprehensible ways.
A loose, decentralised network of far-right activists are the producers, consumers and sharers of the digital memes and misinformation that have fuelled local anger. They use messaging apps to coordinate protests. Seen as something of a figurehead is Tommy Robinson, real name Stephen Yaxley Lennon. He set up the now disbanded English Defence League and is currently out of the country with a warrant issued for him.
So once again, you get this narrative suggesting that this is all about far-right activism. But the scenes we see in a lot of these pictures are, in my view, members of the general public who've just had enough. The Southport murders incensed the nation, as far as I could see. But there was a lot of preaching, let's say, by politicians who said, how dare you go into the streets? But once again, I feel that the public had had enough.
If you think Southport was bad, you've not seen anything yet. You remember, you lived through the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Yeah. That's what's coming to mainland UK. The playbook has always been, all my lifetime, is white working class scum. Stop doing that. Your opinions are not valued. How you want this country is not valued. Shut up, get back in your box, because we're going to call you powerful words now. We're going to call you racist. We're going to call you far right. We're going to call you a fascist. And that's always been enough over decades to quell the frustration of white working class people. Those words mean nothing anymore now. And every time we have an atrocity now, we're going to have violence. And that in Epping, the Bell Hotel, the sexual assault there was enough to create a huge demonstration there that led to violence. All these incidents will lead to violence now because British people have had enough. What else? I don't condone violence, but what else can they do? They've spent 50 years voting for an end to mass migration. The first government committee set up to look at mass migration because the white working class was telling them we're sick of this was 2 years after Windrush landed. 1950 was the first government committee looking at mass migration, and they ignored the findings of that report. And it's been going on ever since. People have voted to end mass migration. Brexit was about mass migration. And every time we tell our so-called leaders what we want, they ignore us. They call us racist, Nazis, fascists. What's left? I think violence is the only way forward. It's going to get worse and worse and nastier and nastier.
Yeah, this is my concern as well. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that descent into vigilantism myself, because it's not really legally controlled, and it means that people who are incensed can themselves become the accused. Indeed, I know that Claire Dyer, one of our other presenters, will be or has actually interviewed somebody who finds himself in a very similar situation to that. You'll see that on Dire Consequences, by the way, if you want to find that program. It should be available even as we speak. But we're seeing this outpouring of rage because the public feel disempowered and unrepresented. Doesn't mean I'm recommending people go out and riot, far from it. But it does mean that I'm recommending the government stops being patronizing and starts understanding, if you lie to us about the ethnicity of somebody, or certainly mislead us about the ethnicity of somebody who's willing to kill children at a Taylor Swift dance club, and it could have been any of our children. And then if you tell us it's nothing to do with terrorism, and then later on we discover that it is to do with terrorism, then people are going to get pretty angry.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. There's always rapists, paedophiles, criminals in every community, in our community, before we had mass migration. But do you know what? They were homegrown, and we have to deal with them ourselves. What's frustrating people now is our children are unsafe, not because of homegrown perverts, but because we keep importing more and more foreign men. So really, the frustration is these crimes never should have happened, because these people never should have been in our country in the first place. That's the major frustration, is why are these men here raping my children? They're illegal immigrants, or they've got a work visa, but I don't want any of them in my country. Why do you keep allowing people in my country who rape us, murder us, assault us, rob us? Why are you letting them here? That's the frustration.
And this leads us to the present day. There's been yet another incident. Is it the Bell Hotel? Tell us about that.
So that started on Friday evening. There'd been protests outside Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And on Friday, local people were demonstrating outside the hotel because an illegal migrant, hundreds of illegal migrants staying in this hotel. And one of them had just been arrested for assaulting a local girl. So the people who had enough went outside, started protesting. Police turned up in riot gear. Why do the police always turn up in riot gear when it's a white demonstration, white British demonstration? Never turn up in riot gear when other communities are demonstrating. Do you remember the riots in Air Hills in Leeds where all the police had to run away? Don't do that when it's white British people. In fact, during that demonstration, there was a lone man shouting at 15 riot police. He got right up to them. They had shields up. He was shouting, just him against 15 riot police. And one of the police officers smashes him in the face with a riot shield and knocks his front teeth out. Have you ever seen anyone ever do that to any? He wasn't hitting them. He wasn't kicking them. He was shouting at them in anger.
The pictures we're looking at there, I understand that the crowd or those protesters believed that some migrant had caused a sexual assault against somebody. I think that was something. It was something like that, which was at the heart of that demonstration. And once again, that hasn't gone to court at this stage, but people again are taking to the streets. Nigel Farage is saying that we now have the collapse of law and order in this country.
Oh, we're on the verge of it. Even law-abiding people now, many of them are not on the side of the police, because we've seen over decades how they treat white British people. We've seen the two-tier justice system, the two-tier policing system. 30 years ago, the only people who hated the police were criminals. Everybody else was on side of the police. I've got people now telling me they wouldn't even help a police officer now who is being assaulted, because you know what? They're just as bad as the criminal. So we've lost respect of the police. We have no confidence in the police. That only benefits the criminals. We're importing more and more criminals. The police's priorities are all wrong. There's more chance of me and you being arrested for saying something on this video than there is someone stealing your phone ever getting caught. We could end up in jail because hate crime, inciting violence, or because we're having a conversation. The police's priorities are all wrong. And Nigel Farage is talking about this, and I'm glad he's talking about it, but he doesn't understand policing. He wants to spend billions of pounds on the police. Really? You want to spend billions of pounds on the same organisation that's failing? No. Whoever comes into government needs to wipe out a top layer of the police. The chief constables, assistant chief, they all need to go, because they're the problem. We need to get back to basics. When I was running for mayor last year, I had several police officers speak to me and say to me, Nick, if we could sack overnight in Greater Manchester 15 to 20% of police officers, the incompetent ones, and not replace them, the performance of Greater Manchester Police would go up overnight. And he says, we're using our good officers going round cleaning up the mess of the poor officers that we all know are crap, but no one can ever sack them. He says 15 to 20% of the police in Greater Manchester need sacking because they're incompetent. There's lots of things we need to do to fix our criminal justice system, but spending more money at this moment in time isn't the answer.
The good news is we have a fantastic foreign minister, Home Secretary, never mind the foreign minister, David Lammy. We'll do an entire show about him, the wit and wisdom of David Lammy. But there's Yvette Cooper, and out of focus in front of her, it says, let's get Britain's future back. I take that as tremendously ironic because this country is having its future squandered by people like Yvette Cooper. One of the people, incidentally, who kept going on about the fact that we shouldn't jump to conclusions about the ethnicity of the scumbag who murdered those children in Southport, that we couldn't say that it was anything to do with terrorism. People like her, you got any faith?
No, but I don't blame her per se. I don't blame Labour per se. People are looking at this government over last year going, the worst government ever. Yeah, maybe, but believe me, they've caused none of these problems. 14 years of Tories enhanced all these problems, but this has been going on for decades and decades and decades. She's just the latest incompetent Home Secretary MP who happens to be in charge. But she's just following the same path that dozens of Home Secretaries have been following for decades and decades and decades. We don't need tweaks at the top. We need to press the reset button in this country and go back to how it used to be and start building again. But this progressiveness, everything needs to be improved all the time and go in one direction. It's killing us.
Next week or next time, I want to talk to you about this. It's your book. Tell us about your book.
Yeah, so this came out a week ago. It's my latest book called Anglophobia. So Anglophobia means the hatred of the English. But it means so much more than that these days. It means the hatred of the British, hatred of all English-speaking people across the world. It basically now means anti-white, hatred of white people. And I talk about where this has come from, why foreigners hate us. And my conclusion is they hate us because they're not us. It's all jealousy and envy. If the best thing your ancestors ever built were mud huts, and you look at what the British have achieved and what the British have developed, of course you're going to be embarrassed of your ancestors, in which case that makes you think the English cheated or your ancestors weren't good enough. So of course they all pick English cheated, they're evil, they're Nazis. And then I also look at why we have self-hate in this country. Why do the elite, the establishment, educated middle-class people, why are they always anti-English, anti their country? And that's basically a mental health condition. I go into so many mental health conditions, and when you're reading the medical explanations of these things, you're going, that's why these people hate us. Our own citizens hate us. So it's a very controversial book. I don't advise anybody on the left to read it because it will upset you. But if we're ever going to solve the problems we've got, we need to understand why we have these problems. And this book goes part of the way to explain why we're in the mess we're in.
Maybe they should precisely be the ones who are reading it. I would like to do an entire. I want to read it myself before we talk about it in detail. But I really want to look at it myself, as I say, and then we can actually have a conversation about that. It's available now. Anglophobia, a price worth paying to be English. An interesting subject, and that's available now. You're saying as well. So
yes, yeah, available on Amazon.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. It's always interesting to talk with you. Not always very cheery, but we'll get you back and let's talk about your book in detail once I've had a chance to look at it myself. I don't want to talk about it without having seen it myself. That's Nick Buckley giving a fairly grim prognosis of the state of law and order in the country. Nick not being that convinced that Nigel Farage has got the right solution. I will get somebody from Reform UK on and from other parties to discuss what the solutions are. Have your say. You can talk to me directly on X. Also, you'll find us on YouTube and soon on Rumble as well. We are progressively expanding where you can get unprecedented.tv. Also, if you've got ideas for shows, do let us know. We are very much focused on you and on free speech. We don't have to agree with what you have to say. As long as you can say it eloquently, you'll find a platform here at unprecedented.tv. And Nick Buckley, MBE, made another interesting point. These days, being outspoken can be enough to get you cancelled. Well, we don't want to be cancelled. We do want to be outspoken. And as I always say, we at unprecedented.tv, we don't want to beat the mainstream media. We want to be the mainstream media, but not shackled to and being the mouthpiece of the establishment. We want to be free speech central. Thanks so much indeed. I hope you're enjoying the ever-expanding stable of shows we've got here. And once again, if you've got show ideas, then do let us know. We're still at that stage where we have space to try your ideas too. I'm Lembit Öpik. This was Lembit Öpik Live on unprecedented.tv. I'll see you soon.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You gotta work. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're gonna feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages,